AM radio, an op-ed column, and Fox News is not enough. I want a center-right nation to fight for its soul, and its soul is represented in the arts. Its soul is represented in a world in which media is everything. AM radio is the lowest form of communication. It's tinny, it's not robust, it's not Avatar. I want Avatar. I want the right to enter the world of media to the extent and invest in media the way that the left does.
The fake media is trying to silence us, but we will not let them, because the people know the truth. The fake media tried to stop us from going to the White House, but I'm president and they're not.
You're listening to the Curt Schilling Podcast, a Breitbart.com podcast. The podcast starts now. Here's Curt with today's headlines.
Hey guys, welcome to another edition of the Curt Schilling Podcast, and we got a good one lined up for you today. Dr. Sebastian Gorka is going to join me and talk about John Brennan and other things, and then James Delingpole will reveal and shed some light on some things that should be in front of you on the front page of newspapers around the country, if not around the world, and we're still not hearing about. But first, we're going to kick it off as we do each day with sound bites that expose and reveal the left for the hypocrites and criminals and liars that they are. They say it themselves, and they don't. I don't know that they understand what a gift they are to us. But starting with this first piece on CNN's The Lead network, I don't know how she's labeled a political commentator, and I'm not really sure what that means, other than she talks about politics. I don't think she has any specific expertise, but she did, talking about President Trump's revocation of CIA Director John Brennan's security clearance, which, by the way, you're going to hear this theme throughout the day. Having a security clearance is not a right. It is an absolute honor and a privilege. And revoking that is both smart and the right thing to do when the person that has the clearance is working against the best interests of the country. Listen up.
Why release it today, a day that the Manafort jury is going to start debating whether or not to convict Manafort, a day where the questions about the N-word tape and Omarosa, a day after Sarah Sanders said she couldn't guarantee that that tape doesn't exist. Why release it today, do you think?
You know, I think someone wants to look at the news cycle, Jake. Look, I think this is ridiculous. This is nothing short of extraordinary, and we should all be scared about the state of our democracy. The president sent his White House press secretary out there today to basically poop on the people from the press secretary podium and not only threaten, like they didn't just make a threat, it was a promise. They're snatching John Brennan's national security clearance. John Brennan was in the Situation Room when American heroes took out bin Laden. Like, what is happening here? And so my question, as it always is what is Congress going to do? Congress is, I'd like to remind people, is a co-equal branch of government. And are they going to... They do need to be reminded. They do need to be reminded. I know sometimes they be forgetting, but what is Congress going to do? Are they going to censure the president? Is Paul Ryan going to say that he didn't see this in the news cycle today?
Paul Ryan
what
said
are the people going
that
to say?
He was trolling. The last time when Trump said this to begin with, Paul Ryan
actually thought he might be right.
Trolling.
You thought he might be right.
So, again, there's someone whose soul has been sold down the river long ago, Jake Tapper, mentioning things that have nothing to do. The Manafort jury, what does it have to do with President Trump? Nothing that the Manafort was on trial for had anything to do with the president, his campaign, the election, any of it. The N-word tape. Is Jake Tapper honestly going to castrate and abuse James O'Keefe for all the things he brought to our attention and just talk about this N-word tape that doesn't exist? Are you kidding me? But I mean, again, having a having a security clearance is a privilege and an incredibly responsible or huge place of responsibility. Anyway, let's move on to the man himself. Listen to this clown who is truly an enemy of the state. And if we're going to talk to Dr. Gorka about him in a little while, but listen to the man himself, John Brennan, talk about his revocation of his clearance.
I do believe that Mr. Trump decided to take this action, as he's done with others, to try to intimidate and suppress any criticism of him or his administration. And revoking my security clearances is his way of trying to get back at me. But I think I have tried to voice the concerns of millions of Americans about Mr. Trump's failures in terms of fulfilling the responsibilities of that sacred and solemn office of the presidency. And this is not going to deter me at all. I'm going to continue to speak out. But I am very worried about the message that it appears that Mr. Trump is trying to send to others, and including those that currently hold security clearances within the government. I think he included Bruce Orr, a current Department of Justice official, among those whose clearances he's reviewing. Is this an effort to try to cow individuals, both inside and outside of the government, to make sure that they don't say anything either that is critical of Mr. Trump or with which he disagrees? And I've seen this type of behavior and actions on the part of foreign tyrants and despots and autocrats for many, many years during my CIA and national security career. I never, ever thought that I would see it here in the United States. And so I do believe that all Americans really need to take stock of what is happening right now in our government and how abnormal and how irresponsible and how dangerous these actions are. So, again, if Mr. Trump believes that this is going to lead me to just to go away and be quiet, he is very badly mistaken.
Well, no, I don't want you to go away and be quiet, Mr. Brennan. I want you to keep talking, because every time you do, hopefully the case file against you gets bigger and bigger. You should go to jail for the things that you've done and said. This was, remember, I believe this was a man who was a card-carrying member of the Communist Party years ago, and if there's anybody working from the inside out for somebody else, it certainly isn't the president. It's people like him. Wednesday on the Situation Room, a man who had the gall to lie about his service in the military, which just shows you, A, how stupid he is, thinking he wouldn't get caught. He tried to create a crisis by somehow associating the security clearance revocation of John Brennan to an illegal violation, that's a double negative, I guess, of the First Amendment of the Constitution of the United States. Listen to this, Senator Richard Blumenthal.
It is not only an abuse of power, it is illegal. It's abhorrent to our values and our national interest, because we need critics like John Brennan to speak truth to power based on their vast experience. Here's someone who has served both Republican and Democratic presidents for decades, but also to use this kind of punishment to chill speech is a violation of the First Amendment. It's the reason why we have the First Amendment. This kind of criticism is core protected speech. When the founders of our great nation decided on the First Amendment, it was because the King of England would retaliate against his critics by punishing them. And so it is a clear violation, in my view, of the First Amendment.
Why is it illegal for the president to do this? My understanding from speaking to intelligence officials is he does have the authority to revoke anyone's security clearance.
He has the authority to do a lot of things, but not in a way that violates the law. And here what we see is, from Sarah Huckabee Sanders' own mouth, that the reason for it is supposedly baseless accusations against
the law. How? What law would it be against?
It would be against the First Amendment, because accusations, in this case, they're far from baseless, but even if they were baseless, it is that kind of public discourse that is protected. And to punish or retaliate against somebody, and this is clearly punishment, using this clearance as a cudgel to try to silence and suppress speech.
Any of you people out there that voted for that man should be ashamed and turn your head away and back away from being involved. He's an embarrassment. And you heard him try and explain that, even though he was being questioned, he couldn't answer actually how it was illegal. He just knows that it was. And then one of the narratives that you often hear on this show is that the left is exactly who they are, say they hate. The left is the very definition of the things that they say they hate. Of all people in this country to talk about someone else being corrupt, we have on Late Night with Seth Meyers, Massachusetts' own Elizabeth Warren talking about the Trump administration being the most corrupt administration in our lifetime. She's playing to the crowd, which she often does. And if there's any sanity in this country, Jeff Deal is going to end this woman's involvement in government in every possible way. So listen to what she had to say.
It does seem as though one of the things, when you talk about how the rich are being taken care of, money is obviously playing a huge role in politics. And I feel as though the Democratic Party also has to answer for the large amounts of corporate money they've taken over the years. You don't take corporate PAC money, but do you think that the Democratic Party has to take a stronger stand against taking corporate money, or is that just the price of doing business?
So look, I've been worried for a very long time about the impact of money in Washington. You know, money just doesn't talk in Washington. It shouts, it screams, it commands. But let's never lose sight of the fact that the Trump administration is the most corrupt administration in our lifetime. And think about example after example that right now the Saudis can funnel money directly, indirectly into Trump's pockets through the Trump Hotel. That the head of the Environmental Protection Agency is a coal lobbyist. And can I tell you about Gary Cohn?
Sure, go for it.
Yeah, so here's the deal. So Trump is setting up his administration. This is a year and a half ago. He's setting up his administration. He brings in all these Goldman Sachs guys. I swear to you, they could have opened a branch office of Goldman Sachs right there in the White House.
This woman is actually speaking about corruption from the Middle East. After we watched the Clintons move hundreds of millions of dollars in dirty money through the Clinton Foundation into their own pockets, she is, well, I've said it before, Elizabeth Warren represents everything any true American hates about Washington. A woman who has absolutely lied and manipulated to take advantage of the system and gain an enormous amount of wealth. And finally, I was talking about Chris Cuomo yesterday and what a clown he is, and there's a reason why. When you listen to Governor Andrew Cuomo giving a speech, talking, and listen, I absolutely agree that this country has flaws. It's always had flaws. It always will have flaws. But this country is the greatest nation on the planet because there is no other country in the world people are fleeing to from everywhere around the world like America because of what it represents and the opportunities it presents for people. But I want you to listen to what the left, what socialist-loving Americans actually think and feel about this country. This is Governor Cuomo. Listen to this.
And look, the simple point is all this comes down to this. We're not going to make America great again. It was never that great. We have not reached greatness. We will reach greatness when every American is fully engaged. We will reach greatness when discrimination and stereotyping against women, 51% of our population, is gone. And every woman's full potential is realized and unleashed, and every woman is making her full contribution. When that happens, this nation is going to be taken even higher, because we have not yet fully liberated the women in this country. And we will. And New York will lead the way, and watch New York rise.
You will. You keep putting more proponents of Sharia law in office like they're doing in Minnesota, and you'll see the potential of women released and the greatness released. Listen, the left pushes for a utopia that is just impossible. It can't exist. Not to say we shouldn't try, and we are. We have. You have an opportunity in this country, no matter where you're born or how you're born. For some, it's harder than others, but you have a chance to be anything you want. There's no other country in the world where you can say that with the rights and the freedoms that we have. Warts and all, this is the greatest country that's ever existed, and there's a reason why. Because we, as people, have the freedom to be and say who we are. Now we're finding out that that's not what these globalists originally intended, how they intended all this to play out. We are encroaching on their power trip, and we're seeing the results of that. They are panicking and freaking and creating dilemmas where they don't exist and issues where they don't exist, and that's what we're dealing with. So anyway, we're going to catch up with Dr. Seb Gorka here in just a minute. We're going to take a break. We'll be back.
Breitbart News Daily with Alex Marlow.
Why did we see some of the Republican kissing of Mark Zuckerberg that was taking place?
I called it kissing the ring because I felt like every single person practically had to kiss the ring of this guy, who wants to do nothing except get all those people out of office. So, bizarre behavior from the Republicans.
Breitbart News Daily, weekdays at 6 a.m. Eastern on SiriusXM Patriot 125.
You're listening to the Curt Schilling Podcast. Once again, here's Curt Schilling.
Joining me now is someone who I've had the honor of meeting and getting to know over the last couple of years, a man who's been instrumental in many, many ways, behind the scenes and in front of the camera, for the positive changes in this country, Dr. Sebastian Gorka. Good morning, Doc. How you doing?
Very well. Thank you for having me.
I know you're swamped busy, so I'll get to this as quickly as I can. Dr. Brennan, National Security Strategist John Brennan, had his security clearance revoked yesterday, and you would think, based on the liberal media's take, that our president committed a felony in doing something he should have done, I think, a long time ago. Talk to me about why he did this.
Well, it's very simple. So, Kurt, the fact is, John Brennan took an oath of office, the same oath of office I took, to protect and uphold the Constitution and to be faithful to it and bear allegiance to it. And ever since he left the CIA and has gone on television publicly to undermine this president and to use words such as treasonous, this is a man who has been given succor to our enemies. My colleague, my friend at Fox News, makes a very important point. Daniel Hoffman, who was our chief of station for the CIA in Moscow, 30 years in the agency, said, because he was the former director of the CIA, because he has a clearance, when this man lies about the president being a puppet of Putin or being in the thrall of Moscow, there are many people around the world who believe John Brennan, and as such, they will not cooperate with us. They will be frightened to provide us with the information we need. So John Brennan is undermining national security on a daily basis. Secondly, that there is a very simple point. Nobody has a right to a clearance. I had a clearance in the White House. It's a privilege of working for the government in a position where you require access to classified information. Nobody in America has the right to a clearance. This isn't a freedom of speech issue. The fact is, John Brennan doesn't need a clearance. There's only two reasons if you leave government service that you can maintain a clearance. Number one, as a private citizen, you are still involved in government projects that require access to an intelligence clearance. He is not. Secondly, if your successor wishes your advice, I can assure you, Kurt, that the current director of the CIA and the president and Mike Pompeo and nobody in the cabinet wants John Brennan's advice.
And I understand that logic from a security clearance perspective, because there are people, it doesn't you don't just end national security policy on one day when one administration ends and the next takes over. There's a transition period, and I'm sure that's been useful in the past. But the fact of the matter is, there was a tweet by Representative Jordan the other day that I wanted to mention, and it just speaks volumes about where we are. John Brennan just lost his security clearance. Clapper lied under oath. Rice blamed Benghazi on the video. Comey fired. McCabe fired. Strzok fired. Yates fired. Page demoted, then left, or demoted. How do I just list all of those things and have those result in the liberals saying that, well, that means that Russia colluded? And we look at that for the reality of what it is, which is this is some of the most corrupt human beings in the most powerful positions our country's ever known on the planet.
Yeah, this is a very depressing point, and we could discuss it at length, but I'll just make a very simple comment. As an American who chose this country, as a proud legal immigrant, the idea that the last administration deemed itself able to politicize the intelligence community at the highest level. We saw the politicization of the IRS. We saw the politicization of the Park Service during the sequester when President Obama closed down the memorials here in D.C. just to politicize the government shutdown. And that's bad enough. But when you see the top level of the FBI, the top level of the DOJ, involved in the acquisition of illegal surveillance warrants based upon opposition research, that truly is a banana republic level of corruption. And as far as I'm concerned, John Brennan was at the center of it, and he is the first, but he will not be the last person who loses his clearance.
Well, I guess I would tell you this, Doc. I'm pissed about the fact that it feels to me like losing their clearance is as bad as it's going to get for these people. They committed crimes. I mean, we know now from the views, the stuff being revealed by Fusion GPS and Richard Steele that the DNC, the Obama administration, the Clinton campaign, and many others conspired to rig and fix a presidential election. They failed miserably. We caught them. And they're still not paying the price. And you know, you're right. Nobody has a right to a security clearance, but I would argue that they play by a set of rules that no one else gets to play by, because you and I are in jail. Well, hell, we're in jail long before this if we're up in front of the liberal gallows. But I just don't understand that. I don't understand how this can be something that doesn't see them paying the price legally for what they did, because what they did was criminal.
I'm going to have to jump now, but I'll just end on this. Curt, have faith. There will be people who will be charged. Whether they are prosecuted is up to the jury, is up to the guidance they get from the judge in the court. But there are individuals, I'm not saying at the cabinet level, but there are individuals at the FBI and DOJ who will be facing very serious judicial proceedings. So patience and faith.
Yeah. Doc, thank you so much. You get I know you're busy. Take care. Thank you for your time.
All right. God bless you and the listeners. Thank you so much.
God bless you. Take care, buddy.
Sonny's Corner with Sonny Johnson.
Everything in hip-hop is not bad. Kanye agreed with us, so let's love him today until he raps tomorrow and you turn your back. Because if you jump off when the fun of the moment is over, then you are in fact making Kanye the token he is accused of being. So please, don't do that. Don't go there.
Sonny's Corner with Sonny Johnson. Saturday from 1 to 3 p.m. East on Sirius XM Patriot 125.
We want to hear from you. Tweet the show at Garrick38. Once again, here's Curt Schilling.
Joining me now, as he does each week on Thursday, the host of his own podcast, known by his last name. He is the one and only James Delingpole. Good morning, sir. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks, Curt. Nice to be back on your show.
Hey, I'm wondering. I've started to see some language out of people in the UK that I think matter. You can tell me if I'm right or wrong, but this Brexit thing appears to be now moving. I'm not sure what direction it's moving, but it appears to be moving.
Yeah, I'm actually more excited than I've been in a while about UK politics, And it's all because of a guy called Boris Johnson. And I don't know how well known Boris is in America, but in a weird kind of way, he's like our Donald Trump. In that, I mean, obviously he's not a kind of a millionaire, billionaire property developer, and he went to Eton, which is the poshest school in the world, so he's not quite like the Donald. Nevertheless, he does have a shock of unruly blonde hair, and he's got this kind of charisma. And I just think maybe if he replaces Theresa May as Prime Minister, and he must, by the way, and if he pushes for a full Brexit, then I think things are good, things are looking up for Britain.
Yeah, and I get it feels to me like there is that sort of a shift. Now, again, I'm not as in tune on the ground over there as clearly you are, but this feels like the people of Britain were they said Brexit, they voted Brexit, they haven't gotten it, and I remember a lot of stories around this initially, James, where people were saying just because they voted for it doesn't mean we have to do it. I mean, that was coming out of some of your politicians' mouth. And I was like, well, wait a minute. Hold on a second. I thought that's exactly why you voted for them, because they had to do the things you wanted them to vote, Now we're looking at Theresa May, baby, which, by the way, I don't know how you feel about it, but I can't wait to see her gone. I think she's malleable.
She's just the worst.
Yeah, I don't think she's done you guys any favors.
Yeah, she really is the worst. And as you say, we have a problem over here, which you've got over there as well. I mean, I think it's a universal problem. The deep state is very real, very powerful. Yep. And Theresa May is a representative of the deep state, whereas Boris Johnson, although he's had to make accommodations with the deep state, as any politician would, he's not of it. He's not a creature of the liberal elite. He's a maverick figure. And I mean, look, the time is ripe for a Trump-style revolution in the UK. Yeah. I mean, we voted Brexit before you voted for Donald Trump.
Well, we voted for Trump because you voted Brexit.
Yeah, exactly. So we've got this kind of symbiotic relationship, and we shouldn't forget that. We shouldn't forget the lessons that we've learned so far, that we are in the middle of a populist revolution around the world in which the liberal elite, call them what you like, the swamp, whatever, is being replaced by people who finally listen to what ordinary folks are saying. And although Boris himself isn't an ordinary folk, he understands people who are.
Well, speaking of ordinary folk, somebody you introduced me to in a way, and I've had on the show and has written a great book. Actually, he came out of hiding this past week and wrote an article in the Weekly Standard, which, by the way, hates Donald Trump. He's an author of the book called Green Tyranny, Rupert Darwall. He wrote an article this week, and I can't think of anybody that's put it better than he did, which is basically he's saying, author Rupert Darwall, who wrote Green Tyranny, is saying that Donald Trump has broken the climate spell. And I don't know any other way to put that, but that appear. I mean, they've receded into the dark corners of the media right now. It's not a fight they're willing to fight, even though they're talking about the California wildfires, a clearly sign of global warming and blah blah blah. But he's right. The Al Gores of the world have been pushed to the back. The hockey stick is being called the farce that it was and is, and mainly it's because again of Donald Trump.
Yeah, it is. Well, as we know, because we've all read Rupert Darwall and we know his theory, that the whole climate change scare story was not generated from the science. It originally came from the politics and the economics. And the politics and the economics was basically these people who said, we must transition from fossil fuels to so-called clean energy, to renewables like wind and solar. And so they cherry-picked the science to suit their economic aim of killing off the fossil fuel industry and replacing it with this kind of subsidized greenery. And as we know, it doesn't work. Renewable energy is a complete waste of time and money. It's environmentally damaging.
Well, it's destroying Germany. I mean, that's clear.
But, and this is the big but. It took Donald Trump to point this out. He was the boy who showed that the emperor was wearing no clothes. And everyone else, I think, suspected the emperor was wearing no clothes, but they didn't have that sort of mix of chutzpah and self-confidence and cussedness that Donald Trump has. And a lot of the world leaders went along with this craziness just because everyone else was doing it, and they didn't want to be left out, and they didn't want to be the leader who went against this belief that the world is in danger and we must do something about it. Donald Trump didn't give a damn about that. He just said, look, this was a bad deal for the U.S. It doesn't work, doesn't make sense. I'm going to pull America out of it. And that's what he did with the Paris Climate Agreement. It's what he's doing with a lot of other stuff through the EPA. But even though this has been good for America, it's also been good for the rest of the world too, because what it's meant is that leaders around the world, for example, the guy who's most likely to be the next Brazilian president, and the people in South Australia who overthrew their renewables-friendly government, and in Canada, in Ontario, where the anti-renewables people won an election, what Donald Trump has done is given people permission to say, hang on a second, I don't believe in this nonsense either. I think fossil fuels work. I don't believe in renewables. So he could just have launched another revolution, this time against the kind of the green craziness.
Well, and also I think one of the other issues, when you look at the climate change movement and how it's kind of receded into the background, one of the reasons why is because in July, the Energy Information Administration forecast that next year we will be the world's #1 producer of oil. And so that all of that, I mean, the liberals talk about, the hatred of war for oil and blah, 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 blah. But the fact of the matter is next year, at some point, we become pretty much energy independent. And that changes not just a lot of socioeconomic factors in this country, but national security issues as well. And you hear nothing about that, which I find to be pretty extraordinary.
It is extraordinary how much the world has changed. I mean, you think in the 1970s, Americans were very worried about energy security. It was a big issue, and you
and acid rain.
Well, yes, acid rain as well. Yeah, well, you had all these scares, didn't you? Invented by the Greenies to justify their anti-nuclear, anti-fossil fuels, whatever. So this has been going on for a long time. But you're right, America's energy independence is a real game changer. It's going to affect not just the lives of of consumers and businesses in the U.S., because it's going to mean that you can produce stuff more cheaply. The cost of living is going to get less, so you're going to have a competitive advantage over much of the world. But it's a huge benefit in terms of global geopolitics, because of what it says. America no longer has to rely on Middle Eastern oil.
And that was what I was going to ask you next. This seismic shift in global power, which is exactly what this is going to change the landscape globally. And I'm wondering, first of all, China no longer sits in the catbird seat, which China, if anybody paid attention to the Paris Climate Accord, it was basically allowing China to run willy-nilly all over the world and pollute anything and everything while making billions of dollars selling rare earth minerals for renewable energy and solar panels for everybody else to use, but not themselves. But the fact of the matter is this is a seismic shift in power, and I'm wondering what that looks like to you. Because, when you read things like Darwall and you study how this came to be over the last 100 years, since the early 30s, you realize how much power has been associated with the green movement. Now the green movement's lost its grip. Trump Trump and Trump-like people around the world are moving into positions of power, and everything's changing. And this has to be very troublesome to the globalists.
Very troublesome indeed, because let's not pretend that the green issue is separate from politics. I mean, that's what they'd like us to believe. They want us to believe that this is what the scientists say, and who are we to dispute what the scientists say? No, it's explicitly, it's obviously political, and it's also indelibly associated with what you call the globalists, with Davos man, with the people who support the European Union, with the kind of, I think to a degree as well, to the never-Trumpers and to Democrats. I think a lot of those rhino squishes who are supporting the carbon tax, cap and trade, whatever variation they want to call it now, they're all part of this massive blob which the Trump revolution is opposing, which the Brexit revolution is opposing. I mean, you can pretty much work out where somebody's position is on global warming based on where they stand ideologically. If they're a globalist, they believe in this whole global warming boondoggle. If they're a Trumpista or a Brexiteer, they think it's bull.
Well, yeah, and I got to wrap it. It's also one of the reasons why they believe in those movements is because those movements provide them with money and power, and the driving force behind it. James, it's always a pleasure, buddy. I really appreciate you catching up, and look forward to talking to you again sometime soon.
Thank you.
Thanks again to Dr. Gorka and to James Delingpole. Winners and losers was easy today, and I'm going to you heard earlier on the show in the sound bites, my loser was easy. Governor Andrew Cuomo is another shining, and I'm glad he's speaking. I want him to continue to speak because the stuff that comes out of his mouth is pure gold for conservatives and for America. He's my loser. Far and away, Andrew Cuomo is my loser today. My winner is a good one. Yesterday, I heard a story, and I had to repeat it. There was a young man who was working at a grocery store, and he was stocking the refrigerator with orange juice. And he noticed a young man standing outside the cooler, staring and watching, pretty much mesmerized by this. He realized that there was something different about this young man, and he started to engage him in conversation. And it turns out the young boy had autism, and he was fascinated watching this young man stock the refrigerator. So what 20-year-old Jordan Taylor did is one of those stories that just makes you understand why we're such a great place to live. Jordan asked the young man if he would like to help him stock the refrigerator, and he said yes. He came back into the cooler with Jordan, and they stocked orange juice together. And he patiently helped him understand what he was doing and helped him do it. And as someone who's been in and around people on the spectrum, I understand how there are just very unique things that capture the attention of a person with autism or who is on the spectrum. The young man's father decided to videotape this, and it has since gone viral. But Jordan Taylor is who we are and represents what we are as Americans. And I want to say thank you to him for being a human, for reaching out to another human being to make their day. Good stuff. Thank you, Jordan Taylor. Guys, God bless. You guys have a wonderful day. We will catch you tomorrow to close out the week. Guys, have a wonderful day. God bless. Thanks for tuning in.
Breitbart News Tonight with Joel Pollack and Rebecca Mansour.
The real thing that the left is angry about is they're like, how could you allow these Russian memes? Somebody saw a meme and then they decided they had to vote for Trump. Or it must have been fake news. And by fake news, they mean conservative websites. Come on. But this is what the left thinks. Fake news. And by fake news, what they mean is shut down Breitbart.
Breitbart News Tonight. Weeknights starting at 9 p.m. East on Sirius XM Patriot 125.